The core was meant to be trained in a lot of ways, in a lot of different directions, but from my experience, a lot of people run out of ideas on how to actually progress their core training. So in this video, I'm gonna give you guys the top 5 moves that I use myself and you're probably not doing yet. The first move, or better yet, the first position you're probably not training right now, but you should be, is what I call the bear position. So everybody is familiar with the traditional plank, but let's be honest, once you can do a 30-second plank, it gets kind of boring. And I'm a big believer that if you can do more than 30 seconds, you're probably better off progressing to something else. And the cool part about it is the bear position, which I'll show you here, actually starts to bring in some other things to the equation. It's still very much an anterior, right? You're kind of resisting this extension of the spine, right, to go down. So it's very much an anterior stability exercise for the core, but now we're integrating some other things. For a lot of people, we're also now integrating in the shoulders and the shoulder complex, right? The ability to actually control and protract and push through those shoulders and build strength as we integrate our core into our upper body. And the other thing you notice too, different from our plank position, here we're a nice long lever, which is good. We want to train that. But this also puts a little bit of a different stress and strain on the pelvis. And the key to getting a great bear position here is going to have to do with our weight distribution. I don't want to have too much weight in the back feet. I really actually want to be pretty heavy in my hands. And whenever I set this up for somebody, usually I'll say, hey, I just want you to lightly kind of march in your feet, just so you keep your weight lighter there. And you'll find even just holding this position for a lot of people, starts to fire up in a very different way and maybe more intense than your actual plank position, all right? So especially, you might have some people who work through some wrist issues. You can always raise them up even higher on like a bench. But for the most part, we're gonna go here and talk about it through the ground. So first way we would train this initially would almost just be like the plank. Can I get here? And just do these nice, deep, controlled breaths, right? Because this is a challenging position. I want to make sure that I'm still able to breathe through the diaphragm to get this good core contraction. So once we've been able to get to where we can hold this position, knees barely off the ground, really light in my toes for 30 seconds, now we can add in. The cool part about this position, there's a lot of things we can do down here. First off, we can just play with our stability, right? Maybe from here, probably the most common one I use this for is these X touches or these shoulder taps. Because the moment, and you'll see I brought my hands in a little closer onto the shoulders, the moment that I raise that hand, boom, my body, it wants to rotate. So I took what was kind of this flexion extension stability move, and now we're adding in some anti-rotation, right? Very tough here, even like 6 reps per side. I could go the opposite and just train lifting those legs, or if I'm really feeling spicy, we could actually turn this into what I call an X touch, which is gonna be much harder on that anti-rotation, all right? So give that one a try. If you've never trained the bear position, it's gonna fire your core up in a very different way, and it might be a little bit more fun than the planks you're doing. Next exercise, or the next position that we're gonna train, is gonna be the kettlebell march, or better yet, like a suitcase march. You might be familiar with like farmer's carries, taking 2 weights and walking down the hallway. Great exercise. Overall, you're training grip, you're training core, but what you'll find is, first off, even with carries, doing a single side carry, whoosh, it's gonna fire up the obliques and what we call the lateral subsystem, all right, which has a lot to do with our adductors, our abductors, and our QL. It's just the ability to control the frontal plane in a very big way, which honestly, from my experience, a lot of people are lacking. So I like the single side kettlebell work. But even before we get into moving, because I find, unfortunately, for a lot of people, even with walks, it ends up looking like a slightly drunken march down the hallway. And so before I get there, we're actually just gonna start with a suitcase march. Doesn't look like a lot, maybe when you're watching this video, but if you do it right, whoof, it's gonna fire up this opposite side. So even as I hold there, I wanna make sure, step 1, the kettlebell is not on my body. Right? I'm not carrying luggage through the airport here and just trying to maintain. I'm trying to get the core engaged, make sure it's slightly off the body. And then step 1 here is we're just gonna go lifting one side and then back down. So if you do this right, even just in this position, the only thing that's keeping you from falling that way is all these inner and outer thigh muscles. And if you're feeling it right, ton of obliques. So initially, we'll just start with a single side because it's easier on the balance component, maybe getting about 8 to 10 reps and then moving to the opposite. And I want you, if you're doing this, or if I'm with a client, right, I'm poking. I don't know if you feel that. We're feeling some tension there. Good deep exhale at the top. No holding our breath. And we're going from there, okay? So that would be one piece. If you want to progress this, we can now actually, it's going to take a little bit more balance and shifting. Easy on this side. It's going to be hard on this side. Just having to now adjust, which is really what happens when you're walking down the hallway. So I like being stationary here first. Also, cool part is, gets people focused on good hip flexion, which a lot of people lack. So that alone, whew, surprisingly taxing on the core. But I know you guys like next level, so we're going to take it up a notch here too. And this is actually adding a mini band. And I would even go lighter. Here I've got the NT loops, but you want to go with a really light band here because the hip flexors now get fired up. And so this one, now we've got some resistance, not just the kettlebell pulling me over, but I also have kind of where my hip flexors tie into my core. This one is really going to force you to create some tension on that side. And I love it because, again, we're trying to train the hip flexors as part of our core musculature, which they are, tying the hips and the core together. That's a great one. This is an awesome one to throw in before your workouts, maybe somewhere in your warm-ups. Give it a try. Our third move brings us down to the floor into one of my favorite positions to train not just myself, but a lot of clients when it comes to core, and that's going to be the lateral plank position. I find that the control of this frontal plane, very much like the kettlebell march in the previous exercise, is lacking for a lot of people. This one, though, is going to be a little bit more advanced, so you definitely want to make sure that you've seen somebody master or you yourself have no problem with traditional lateral planks. First, this one, the adductor lateral plank. And I'll tell you, in this one, you guys can use a variety of surfaces. You could use a very small plyo box. That might be the best to start with. It's a little bit less, or it's a little bit more stable. I like the stability ball though, especially if you've got pretty good core control, because it's really going to force you to compress into the ball. So I'm going to show you a couple versions or positions for this one. First off, lateral plank, couple things we're looking for. I want to make sure elbows lined up right under the shoulder. I want to create tension through that fist. I want to push through the ground. That's going to make sure I've got stability in this shoulder. Some people kind of like dip into here and they feel some shoulder pain. So you want to make sure you're strong driving through the floor. The other thing I'm going to start with, bottom knee bent, top leg straight. And this is about as high as I would want someone to go, right? This ball, whether it's a bench or a box or something else. Because now the cool part is since I've separated these two, this is going to force me to bring in some more adductors, which if you guys do this one, not only is that, again, an important area for us to train, isometric strength and those adductors, but you'll find that the adductors on this side are very much tied to the obliques on the opposite. And doing this version of this lateral plank, most times, even with this bottom knee bent, you're going to feel way more obliques firing on this bottom side. So version one would be me just being able to hold this. Again, my target is I want to be able to get a couple sets of 30 seconds before I progress somebody. All right, let's say someone's done well there. You're feeling pretty good here. Well, we could just turn this in to a hip tap. And I can tell you guys from like doing 2 reps, it's already firing. We're getting, again, a little bit of abductor here, a ton of obliques, and especially as I drive through that top leg, man, it goes right into those obliques. So this is a great way to kind of supercharge your lateral plank. You could play with bottom leg straight. I actually find most people, myself included, get better oblique engagement because it's not so much on the hip. I get better oblique engagement when that bottom knee is bent. But you could go straight leg. Okay, this is gonna be longer chain on that bottom leg. This bottom leg is having to work a little bit more. It's still gonna be plenty of obliques, but you can play with those 2 variations to see which one gives you the best oblique engagement, and I promise you, that one's gonna be your new favorite oblique exercise. You guys might have done reverse crunches before, but I'm gonna give you guys a couple of cues and upgrades to this move to make sure you guys get more out of it. I love the reverse crunch because it gives us an opportunity to train really flexion and extension, mostly flexion of the core, in a way that is maybe going to be quite a bit different than doing a traditional crunch. And one of the things that's unique about this is having the upper body fixed, right? The upper body fixed on the bench. I'll show you what I mean. So if you do this right now I have the bench slightly declined down, which is going to make it harder. You could do this on a flat bench. You could even do this on flat ground where you have something heavy to anchor yourself to, all right? Because the key here is being able to have something that you can pull in, right? Because for a lot of people, I find with some of our core moves, especially some stuff on the ground, is being able to create the appropriate engagement. And especially if you do it right, even if I don't move on this one yet, first cue is whatever I'm grabbing and anchoring, I want to pull up on, right? When I pull up, you'll see my ribs should actually kind of go down. All right, so right away I'm creating that engagement. Upper abdominals especially you're gonna feel, and that's my anchor point. Okay, that's gonna be my anchor point. I'll show you a couple different versions of this. I like to initially do this one and teach it with knees bent, because really what we're looking for is real smooth, clean movement of our spine. It's like I wanna roll my lumbar spine up, and this is the supercharged piece. If you guys learn how to breathe during this exercise, you will get so much more out of it. So I'm gonna come, as I come up, I'm anchoring my body, knees are bent right around 90, deep exhale. Almost like I'm blowing all the air out. And mentally, it's okay if someone doesn't get all the way up here, right? But in my mind, I'm trying to think about bringing my knees to my elbows and then really slowly lowering back down. Exhale, coming up, slow, one vertebra at a time back down. And all of a sudden, even 2 reps are gonna get much more intense than if I'm just throwing my body up here. So you gotta have the core strength to do it, but the other key piece you guys can do on this, bringing back to how our adductors are a part of our core, create tension, push the toes together, right? That alone kind of closes this loop, and it's just gonna give you a really nice, consistent tension in the core, and you're gaining a little bit of stability from those adductors as you go through the exercise, okay? Now, if that's too much for you, you can go one leg at a time, all right? Meaning, maybe you're able to come in, and then you just come down one leg. That's gonna be a little bit less on the core and the pelvis. And if you want more, just straighten the legs as you come down. This is gonna be a much longer lever to control as we go through these. But hands down, if you do this one right, this is probably my #1 go-to exercise for the rectus abdominis and the anterior core. We can't talk about core training without getting into a little bit of rotation, and there are a lot of great ways you guys can train rotation with the core, like landmines, which I'm a big fan of, but probably the easiest and most accessible to the most people are gonna be either band or cable rotations. If I can choose, I'm gonna opt for the cable because of the ability to have kind of this consistent resistance, but bands are also a great way to dive into this. And so when I say cable rotations, there's a lot of ways we can rotate. Initially, like if I had to choose one for you guys to train, just straight horizontal rotations, probably the best. Beyond that, I'm also a big fan of high to low. But here's a couple of things you gotta make sure, if you're gonna do these, because I see a lot of people do them and not get the most out of them, these are the pieces you wanna think about. First off, very rarely do I want to see locked out, right? You don't have a lot of leverage there. Athlete, boom. Bending the hips and knees a little bit. Because the cool part about this is now I get to use abductors, adductors, glutes, hips, and these are pivotal, important parts of the core. And when we think about core rotation, we could train it just to come from the spine, but more naturally, it's going to come from hips and spine, and actually a lot from the hips. So the thing that I like about bands or cables with this horizontal is it really gets you internal, external, integrating the hips into the core. And there's a lot of great research out there that shows that, hey, if we can get the hips and the shoulders engaged while we're training the core, you're gonna get a ton of engagement here. So we'll keep this one simple. Soft bend hips and knees. I want toes relatively forward. A little out's okay. I just don't want out here, because when you're out here, you can't get the glutes that well. So toes forward, slight little, bend in the hips and knees, and then think chest level. Chest level, arms as straight as I can keep them. As the band gets heavy, you might need to bend them, but otherwise, all the way across the body and slow back. And if you're doing this one right, you're gonna feel core all over. You're gonna feel it around the backside. That's because we're getting internal and external obliques. You're getting some engagement in your rectus abdominis. You're using erector spinae, glutes, hips. This one is firing everything up. So if you're not already doing some sort of band or cable rotation in your training, make sure you throw it in.